Okay, so you folks run businesses locally, and I assume you know that you can't expect to expand your business unless there are people out there who have money to purchase whatever it is you're selling. In this economy, there's nobody that's got enough money. Very few people have got enough money to do that, to buy whatever it is you're selling, whether it be insurance or bank accounts. I'll go through some numbers later if I have an opportunity to, but specifically talking to you, I'd like to come back in 2 years and see all these tables filled, completely filled, 10 people around each table. And one of the ways to do that is to look at a portion of the economy that's growing. I've made some calls and found out that they're growing at 20% a year, even in this terrible economy. And I will admit it will take the Chamber a great deal of intestinal fortitude to do this. Talking about New York, New York City has invested $1.2 million in worker cooperatives. I'd like to see you look into that. Try to create some worker cooperatives, worker-owned businesses. There are several different forms they can take. And I'd like to come back and roll up my sleeves with you if you'll invite me to do that, so that these tables will in fact be filled 2 years from now. And there will be more demand from folks who have a lot less money than the folks who are getting the money. We'll go into those numbers later. Getting the money during this terrible downturn in our economy.
Thank you. Mr. Delaney, you'll be answering this next question first, and Mr. Black will come to Mr. Bongino. The next question is this. Will you support funding for the widening of 81, and how can you secure that money?
Well, as I said in my prior answer, because I think it's an incredibly important thing for this region to compete strategically, I would make funding for the widening of I-81 a top priority, and I've been doing that in the Congress, pushing against that as hard as possible. We have some money for the overpasses between here and Virginia. Pennsylvania's done a bunch of things. We haven't done enough on I-81. It's become one of the most important north-south corridors for transport that's trying to get around 95 and not deal with all the metropolitan areas that clog things up there. So it has to be top priority. The other thing that I've got, which I think is relevant to this, is I've got a bill in the Congress called the Partnership to Build America Act, which has almost 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans on it. It's in the House, it's in the Senate. It's the most bipartisan economic legislation in the whole of the Congress. It creates a $750 billion infrastructure fund, and it creates it with no government spending. All the money is put in by private companies, and the way we do that is we give them an incentive to invest, and the incentive is tied to their ability to repatriate their overseas earnings back to the United States. It's really smart public policy, and it's got tremendous bipartisan support. And the unique thing about it is it's not money that the federal government can use. It's money that only the state and local governments, so Maryland can use it, Washington County can use it, Town of Hagerstown can use it. It's really focused on getting at the local problems. And so I think I-81 is a big issue. Obviously, we should be pushing the state and federal government to provide the funds to widen it, which is their responsibility. But we also need innovative solutions to increase this infrastructure funding nationally.
Thank you.
Yes, so I have relatives who live up in Binghamton, New York, and even before the program Waze, which I used to get here this morning, and got me directly to the spot. Long before that, it was clear to me that getting up to New York was a lot faster using 81 than 95. I've been doing that for 35 years. So it's kind of clear that for me and folks like me, widening 81 would be very helpful. But I noticed that Pennsylvania started to look into doing that, but they've withdrawn their funds or their will at the moment. So the question in my mind is, what can we do to make sure that the entire run of 81 is widened? Because if it isn't widened along Pennsylvania as well, widening it here won't do that much good. It'll be a bottleneck at the border. So yes, I'd like to see it widened, but I'd like to see it widened the entire way, so we don't have folks staying here waiting on the other side, going south as well. The other thing is the way to pay it. I don't think the Congressman's way to pay it is this expatriation of monies is, in my humble opinion, if you look closely at it, it's a way to bring money that has been allowed to go overseas untaxed, to bring it back in almost untaxed. And I'm not sure we're going to see a great deal of that money. We'll probably obviously a very small percentage of that expatriated money back here in use.
Thank you. Mr. Bongino?
Well, I prefer direct answers, and the answer is yes. But I-81 you can't view in a vacuum. Of course we should widen 81, but it's not just 81. There's a reason they call 270 the Big Ugly. It's not because people enjoy sitting there listening to talk radio for 3 hours as they try to leave Washington, D.C. Do you realize the productivity hours lost by all of those employees sitting there in traffic? Listen, I love the radio. I love satellite. I love my apps on my phone. But those are man hours. Those are creative hours lost as we smog up the atmosphere on 270. George mentioned North-South. North-South is another project I would support. We have to get the region moving again. It's not moving. Where John and I disagree substantially is on his program for this, what I call the crony bank. That money has already been taxed by those companies. Those companies have paid taxes territorially in the regions where the money is now. That money should be back invested in the business and the employees in this room. We already spent $1 trillion on a stimulus program for infrastructure that has been wasted. Folks, is there any accountability here? $1 trillion, 1/17 of everything we produce was spent on roads and bridges, and you're still sitting in traffic on I-270. That should answer your question right now as to why that money should be pumped back in business, and user fees should be building the roads. The people who use the roads should pay for them.
Thank you. And I want to reinforce and thank you for sticking to our time frames. You've done a great job, and we appreciate that. Thank you. Mr. Gluck, you will answer this question first, and then we'll come around to Mr. Bongino and then Mr. Delaney. Do you think that compromise, consensus, or at least finding common ground on issues is a necessary function of governance, and how will your voice change existing dysfunctional Congress?
Well, of course, in the past, that's the way we got things done in Congress. We had, if you took a look at the political spectrum, which I mentioned in my opening statement, there was overlap. There used to be overlap. There used to be folks in the Republican Party who were to the left politically of some of those folks in the Democratic Party in Congress. That's not true anymore. The separation is getting wider and wider. And one of the reasons that's so is because of the way we run our elections. But let me just say that if I were to be elected, that act alone would almost force compromise. And folks in Congress would have to take note of the fact that, that the folks in District 6, if we get a chance to conclude, I'll give you some more information, get a concluding statement in. But they would have to take note of the fact that you folks out there are fed up. In fact, let me quickly give you a number here. I looked it up this morning before coming here. So, very quickly, in 1/4/2003, since then, up through last month, the number of people in District 6 who have registered has gone up by 20,000, 18,000 to be exact. And 13,000 of those registered unaffiliated. That tells you something about their wish to just destroy this division that exists right now.
It's a great system. That makes it easy to stay on target. Compromise, that word is thrown around quite a bit in D.C. Unfortunately, what it sadly means for some in the media within D.C. is compromising core values when you're a conservative libertarian, and that's not acceptable. I'm not going to compromise core values. My core values are I will not, and I cannot be clearer on this, I will not ever vote to raise your taxes under any circumstances. So if you're asking me to compromise on that, no, that won't happen. In addition, compromise. There are issues we could compromise on, but unfortunately the toxic political atmosphere in D.C. due to all the insiders has made that impossible. There are areas of agreement. The corporate tax is one of them. Harry Reid, of all people, agrees that our corporate tax rate is too high. So you have to ask yourselves, again, why can't we get this done? The answer, unfortunately, having spent a number of years within the 18-acre White House complex, the toxic environment over there and political leverage has prevented people from doing the right thing because many of them have already sold you out. There are areas we can agree on school choice as well. There are a number of Democrats that support school choice initiatives. There are a number of Democrats who support revisions to Obamacare that involve patients choosing their own health care future. Unfortunately, again, saying anything negative about Obamacare as a Democrat has become political suicide. Well, folks, it's time that we change things because it was the right thing to do, not just because you're worried about re-election.
Thank you.
So the two things I learned from my business career is the best business deals are ones where everyone feels a little bad when they're done, which means they had the spirit of compromise. And two, if you want to get things done with people, you don't say bad things about them and you work in a constructive manner. And that's the spirit I've brought with me to Congress. Everything I'm doing is on a bipartisan basis. And it's not by some mushy kind of watered down, I stand for nothing set of principles. It's by taking really good ideas that the progressive movement in this country has, and really good ideas that the conservative movement in this country has, and figuring out how to forge them together in a compromise where you can actually move things forward. And I've demonstrated my ability to do that in the Congress of the United States. I also don't say bad things about my colleagues. There's way too much ranting and raving going on and finger-pointing going on in this government where people blame the other side. It's ridiculous. No one behaves like that in the real world. I say to people, if you want to work with people, you don't say bad things about them. You may factually correct them. Like Dan said, there was $1 trillion spent on infrastructure and stimulus. Well, in fact, the stimulus was $900 billion and only 15% of it was infrastructure. So it's okay to factually disagree, but you don't say bad things about them. And that's what we need more in Congress. We need people to work towards solutions. We need people who are not part of government. I had nothing to do with government my whole career. I was sitting in your seats. I was solving problems. I was getting things done. And we need to reform how our elections are done. I have some legislation on that, which I won't go into because of the time limit, but we need election reform so that more independents can vote and we can have a better representation in government.
Thank you. Mr. Bongino, I believe you're going to answer this next question first. We're going to widen a little bit, and what is your position on the issues around immigration?
Well, this is a sensitive topic for me, given that it's so personal. My wife was a first-generation immigrant from Colombia, came here when she was a young child. The difference is she came here illegally. Cost us a lot of money and a lot of time. Spent about $10,000 on attorneys. My wife's story is far more profound than mine. Her mother, when she brought her here, they had no money, didn't speak any English, and they cleaned planes in John F. Kennedy Airport. That was her first job. And they slept on a mattress in a basement apartment in Jackson Heights, the four of them. There was no father there. It was her and her 3 kids. And she'd tell the story about how they had to sleep foot to head because there was no room. And sometimes at night, she could hear my wife's stomach growling because they had no food. So when people talk about immigration, it doesn't bleed for them like it bleeds for me. My great-grandparents were immigrants. This country's been enriched by the intellectual creativity of immigrants coming from all over the world to build their businesses here. But the bottom line, folks, is amnesty's not the solution. You have to follow the rules. Amnesty is not benevolent, it's not compassionate. You are inserting people into a black market economy that doesn't benefit us and doesn't benefit them either. We have to reform the system, implement mandatory e-verify, and we have to secure our border and stop making it the political football it's become. We put a man on the moon. I assure you we can secure our border.
So, obviously this country is a nation of immigrants. My grandfather on my mother's side was born in England. He had one arm. He came to this country and worked at his factory his whole life. My grandmother her parents were born in Ireland. My grandfather on my father's side was born in Ireland. He was a shipbuilder in Jersey City, New Jersey. My grandmother's parents were born in Ireland. I grew up in North Jersey and was all first-generation immigrant population. So this whole country, you travel around the country, the narrative of how this country was built by immigrants is so important to who we are as Americans that we can't forget that. Right now, there's a bipartisan bill in the Senate of the United States, and it's a bipartisan bill, and it's not just a token bipartisan bill, it's a real bipartisan bill. And it addresses all the identified flaws in our immigration system, right? It deals with employment issues that we have, right? It deals with keeping high-skilled workers in this country. It deals with creating visas for farm workers. It has a massive investment in securing our border. It deals with the 11 million undocumented residents in this country. It's a deal, it's a compromise, it's bipartisan in the Senate. Everyone agrees that this would advance the country forward economically. The CDO has scored this bill, saying it will lower the debt in this country by $100 billion. It'll create jobs. It'll lay the groundwork for a future competitive America. It'll secure our border. But it's stuck because it's stuck over ideology. And the problem with ideology is people give you the answer before they look at the facts. If you look at the facts of our immigration system, you look at that bill, it's obvious we should approve that bill.